In 1926, more than 1.6 million striking workers brought Britain grinding to a halt. It was the first and only general strike in British history and remains one of the defining moments in the labour movement. 100 years on, our next issue of New Internationalist marks its legacy and global significance, exploring how the events continue to shape debates about workers' power, democracy, and the right to strike today. With workers' rights and trade unions under attack around the world, it's more important than ever to revisit the lessons of 1926 and the enduring power of collective action. Subscribe today via the link in our show notes to read this issue in full.
You know, one of the many things that's really messed up about how a lot of Jewish people from Europe learn their history is they learn about Jewish European history as if everything is just the prelude to the gas chamber. They don't learn about it as something where these are people who lived. They don't view it as something alive.
Welcome to The World Unspun. I'm your host, Maxine Betteridge-Mose. Today's guest is Molly Crabapple, the award-winning writer, artist, and author of the forthcoming book, Here Where We Live Is Our Country. The book tells the little-known story of the revolutionary Jewish Labour Bund movement, a party which aimed to build a socialist alternative to Zionism while fighting violent anti-Semitism in Eastern Europe in the early 20th century.
The Bund was a group that ferociously fought for their place in Europe, but at the same time, they were socialist, they were secular, they were ethical universalists, they were internationalists, and they opposed Zionism from the first days of their existence.
We also talked about how the history has been suppressed by Zionist propaganda.
The Bund opposed Zionism because they viewed it as a handmaid of British imperialism. They viewed it as an attempt to suppress the political rights of the vast majority of the inhabitants of Palestine, who were Palestinian Arabs, and to do that with the help of British bayonets.
And Molly also shared her thoughts on what we can learn from the Bunds when calling for peace in Gaza and an end to fascism all over the world. Please note that this episode contains some strong language. Here's a simple idea. Big rooftops should have solar. Across the UK, there are thousands of large buildings with empty roofs that could be generating clean electricity right now. Instead of waiting for government or big energy companies to get on with it, Big Solar decided to do it themselves. Big Solar Co-op is a not-for-profit cooperative owned by its members, installing solar on big rooftops across Britain. Join and invest from £100 at bigsolar.coop. Capital at risk, please read their online share offer document for details. So I was wondering if you could just start by telling us a bit more about who your great-grandfather was and how he came to inspire your latest book.
My great-grandfather was a character. That's probably the best way to put it. He was a post-impressionist painter, a poet, not published anywhere, an amateur philosopher, and someone whose personality was so large that even though he died 12 years before I was born, I grew up feeling like I knew him. He came to America from the swath of land that was once called the Pale of Settlement, a part of the Russian Empire, in 1904. And he became an artist. He first chronicled everything about New York City, about the nature, the buildings, the life, Coney Island, the Forward Building, all of that. And then as time wore on, he decided that he wanted to paint back into existence the world of his shtetl childhood back in the small town Volkovisk. And I grew up feeling so close to my great-grandfather in large part because he taught my mom how to paint. And my mother, a professional illustrator, she taught me how to paint. So I felt like I had this, how do you put it, like a transgenerational inheritance of painting and probably of being kind of defiant and bohemian and oppositional like Sam Rothbard was too. But in terms of how Sam led me to discovering the Bund, in the 1930s, after Kristallnacht, he began to work on this series of paintings of the small town that he came from, Volkovisk. I think he realized that this town, I don't think he foresaw what was going to happen to it, but I think he knew that it wasn't going to last forever the way it had been in his mind. And these paintings that he called memory paintings were amazing. They showed every aspect of life. There was the holy, right? There was the rabbi reading the Torah. There was the profane himself as a naughty 13-year-old boy spying on women in the bathhouse. There was funny stuff. There was tragic stuff. There was humanistic stuff. There was journalistic stuff. But the one painting that always stood out to me from the first moment I saw it, it showed a young woman, and she had a little corseted waist, and she had big Gibson girl hair. And she was standing on a dirt road at twilight, and the sky was the same color as her dress. And she was throwing a rock through a window. And her boyfriend was standing next to her, holding more rocks, because a woman should not carry her rocks on date night. And it was titled Itka the Bundist. And I remember when I saw Sam's little handwritten caption on the back, and I was like, Bundist, what's that? And that is the question that led me to my obsession.
And this whole book sort of is built upon a 2018 article that you wrote for the New York Review of Books about how you first discovered the Bund. And you wrote that at the time of releasing that article, you got a lot of really positive feedback from young Jewish people, as well as the descendants of some of the Bunds. Can you talk a bit about some of the reaction that you got from people after publishing that?
I still have young people stop me on the street and tell me how much that piece meant to them. I mean, I think there are two aspects, right? For a lot of young Jewish people, they just never knew that their ancestors fought back. They had this image that was like really pushed, in a lot of Hebrew schools, and it's kind of the Zionist narrative, which is that there were the weak Jews in the diaspora who were all murdered. And then there are the strong Jews in Israel, strongly oppressing Arabs, and they're alive. And the weak diaspora Jews were killed because they were weak, and the Zionists were strong and they lived. And that narrative could not be further from the truth. And I think one of the things that really drew young people to my article was the Bund was a group that ferociously fought for their place in Europe. And I don't just mean that they fought with words, right? That they fought with articles. They fought with grad school seminars. I mean, they fought with guns, right? They fought against pogroms. They fought against terrorist nationalist youth paramilitaries. And ultimately, they helped lead the Warsaw Ghetto Revolt. But at the same time, they were socialist. They were secular. They were ethical universalists. They were internationalists. And they opposed Zionism from the first days of their existence. And so finding out about this group for a lot of young people was like finding out about ancestors they never knew they had. But in terms of the older people, this was something that was really, really special to me. These amazing, amazing children and grandchildren of Bundist leaders got in touch with me after I wrote that piece from all over the world. These are people like the pioneering lesbian poet Irena Klepfich, who became one of my personal heroes. Her father, Michael, was the bomb maker in the Warsaw Ghetto. She was born in the Warsaw Ghetto. My friend Mark Ehrlich, he's a union leader in Boston. He was actually the first Jewish leader of the Carpenters Union in the Northeast in America. It was typically pretty like Irish dominated. He also got in touch with me. His grandfather, Henryk Ehrlich, was the leader of the Bund in Poland. My friend Viktor Galinsky, he's a nuclear physicist. His father, Shloime Galinsky, ran the crown jewel of the Bundists network, this amazing sanatorium for tubercular slum kids that was called the Medem Sanatorium. And, Viktor, he's in his 90s. He still has memories, right, of this beautiful place that his dad built. And these people felt like their parents and grandparents had been marginalized, even though they were so brave and created culture that was so beautiful, and that even though their morals were so right, and they were grateful to me. because I had resurrected these memories. And also they wanted to tell me more things. And as I spoke to these amazing people, I realized that I was not done writing about the Bund with one article. Oh no, I had to do something much bigger with it. And it was really people like Mark and Irena and Victor that convinced me to write this book.
Yeah, and so, I mean, it seemed like such a simple question to start with, but for many people, like, the term Bund will be unfamiliar. What is the Bund? Where does it come from? How did it start?
The Bund was born in the Russian Empire in 1897. And the Russian Empire in 1897 was probably the worst place to be a Jewish person in the entire world. Not only were you living under an oppressive autocracy that was sending people to Siberia for book clubs, not only was the Russian Empire incredibly poor, incredibly industrially backwards, but as a Jew, you were a racialized minority. You were confined to a swath of land that was called the Pale of Settlement. You were banned from all sorts of work. Unless you were very rich, you couldn't live in the capital. You were subject to military conscription for 25 years. 25 years, imagine. You had limits on whether you could go to university. And basically your life was strangled because you were Jewish. There was also a lot of freelance violence, a lot of, racism, some of it backed by the state, some of it just people getting their kicks by punching down on a minority. But you were subject to these like twin oppressions. You're both oppressed as a working class person in an autocratic state, but you're also oppressed as a minority. And it was really these twin oppressions that inspired a group of young Jewish Marxists to create the Jewish Labour Bund. Bund means organization in Yiddish. And the goal of the Bund was twofold. They wanted to overthrow the Tsar and bring democratic socialism to Russia. But they also wanted their own people to be liberated, to thrive, to have beautiful lives on the land where they had lived for at least 1,000 years. The Bund would go on to educate shtetls, to build armed self-defense squads against pogroms, to champion the Yiddish language, and to create an entire beautiful world. They were kicked out of Russia after the Bolshevik Revolution, but they regrouped in interwar Poland, where they had their heyday. They created an entire amazing counterculture. They had a women's movement that fought for birth control. They had a kids movement that was like the Boy Scouts. They had summer camps. They had hikes. They had theater troops. They had the Medem Sanatorium, as I told you, the sanatorium for slum kids at risk of tuberculosis. They had labor unions. They had publishing houses. A Bundist founded YIVO, the Center for the History of Eastern European Jews, which was like this amazing cultural preservationist project built by Jewish people who the dominant culture said their culture was shit, but Jewish people were like, no, our culture is beautiful, it's valid. They also had armed self-defense groups that protected their community from racist militias, from nationalist attacks, and also like from the mafia and from predatory landlords. And in addition to all of this, they had a strong relationship with the Polish Socialist Party, which became kind of their sister party. Because even though the Bund was a Jewish group, that didn't mean that they were isolationists. They saw themselves as fighting for multiracial, multi-ethnic, multicultural democracy and socialism as well.
You didn't come to learn about this history until, into your adult life. And why do you think it's not more known?
In terms of American Jews, I think there are two reasons. I mean, the first was that the Bund was physically annihilated by the Holocaust. 90% of the Jews in Poland were murdered. And then after the Holocaust, Poland had a Stalinist puppet government that suppressed not just the Bund, but also the Polish Socialist Party and also any competing leftist party. So there's just the physical facts of force. But the second reason, and I think this is a much deeper reason, is that the Bund opposed Zionism from the start. From the very first days of the Bund's existence, they thought of Zionism as a collaborationist attempt to work with the same anti-Semites that wanted to kick Jews out of their homes in Europe. One of the sort of great ironies of history is that the year the Bund launched in 1897 was the same year that political Zionism launched. And these launches could not be more different. The Bund was started by young fugitives in the attic of a shambolic safe house in Vilna. And World Zionism launched at a ritzy casino in Basel, Switzerland, with a very, very grand conference, and made its founder, Theodor Herzl, into an international superstar. And from the very start, these groups loathed each other. At the beginning, before the Balfour Declaration, the Bund just found Zionism to be really, really, really unrealistic and dumb. They were like, oh, you're going to take 9 million Jews and you're going to have them leave their homes in Europe to become collective farmers in the Levant? Did not seem very practical. But after the Balfour Declaration, the Bund opposed Zionism because they viewed it as a handmaid of British imperialism. They viewed it as an attempt to suppress the political rights of the vast majority of the inhabitants of Palestine, who were Palestinian Arabs, and to do that with the help of British bayonets. Because of this long-standing beef between the Bund and Zionism, as Zionism became a dominant ideology in the Jewish community, it really sought to erase the Bund. And that's the reason I think that their story is not more widely known.
Have you received pushback from the Zionist movement, the Zionist lobby, over the course of researching and writing this book?
Oh my God, it's insane, right? So I get notes from people writing me the foulest things. They write, for instance, they're like, well, the Bund was gassed in Auschwitz, as if a genocide is some sort of argument, as if a genocide is a college debate that proves that someone's opinions are right, as opposed to the greatest crime humans are capable of. I routinely get Zionists who call me a capo, who say that the Bund all deserved to die because they wanted to stay in their homes in Europe, who laugh at the Bund for being murdered in Nazi gas chambers, as if, 6 million Jews weren't murdered, as if, to be murdered in the Holocaust meant anything more than simply that you were a Jew in Europe. It's very disgusting. And I think it shows the profound insecurity and moral rot of their positions, that they resort to this sort of slander of Holocaust victims, of people who were valiant fighters for the Jewish community. It's really shoddy. It's shoddy, and it's kind of pathetic.
I think what is so great about this book is being able to learn from movements and people who aren't in this sort of main narrative and the sort of, mainstream education that we're taught on major world events. And I think a lot of Jewish people have been at the forefront of calling for peace in Palestine, and that there's been so many, incredible Jewish peace activists. Have you seen sort of this solidarity between Jewish people and other groups in the US play out, particularly over the last couple of years of Trump's latest term?
Oh my God, there's amazing Jewish groups. I mean, I always think about my comrades in Jewish Voices for Peace who, have been getting arrested and hauled off to jail, not just since the start of the genocide, but since long before, to try to protest against, apartheid, against supremacy, and, to fight for justice, right? I mean, I think about all of these amazing Jewish activists who really fought for Zoran Mamdani to be able to become mayor. I mean, I feel so lucky to come from New York City. And one of the many, many things I love about the city is that this is a city where the Jewish left has always been so strong and so vibrant, and is really an inextricable part of building the city. It was Jewish socialists, former Bundists, who helped create public housing in New York City, who ran the garment unions, who, built these amazing co-ops for workers, like palaces for workers, like amalgamated housing. I mean, Jewish socialism is interwoven in the fabric of New York City. It's completely inescapable from it, and it's an amazing legacy.
And I know you write as well about learning Yiddish and poring over ancient kind of Yiddish texts over the course of your research. And I think I'm about to butcher this pronunciation, but you write that the Bundists created the doctrine of Dokeit?
Dokeit.
Dokeit. Okay, I wasn't as far off as I thought.
Not that bad.
I'm sure there's much trickier words. But the doctrine means here-ness. I'm wondering if you could explain a bit more about what that doctrine means and how your understanding of it has kind of unfolded.
What here-ness meant for the Bund was that Jews, and it didn't just mean Jews, but they're a Jewish group, but that everyone had the right to live and to flourish and to thrive and to have safety and freedom and dignity in the land where they lived. It was a complete statement of defiance against blood and soil nationalism, against the logic of ethnic cleansing that would, take over Europe and that would lead to the deaths of 3% of the world eventually. And it was also a statement of defiance because the Jews who were writing about Dokeit were not living in a peachy keen fun place. They were not living in New York City like I am, where, my life is great here. These were people who were the subjects of an incredibly racist autocracy that would have just as soon kicked all of them out. Or else they were later people who were living in Poland between the wars, where this paranoid, insecure Polish nationalism quite literally wanted to ethnically cleanse all of the country's 3 million Jews to Palestine. So when they were saying, here is my place, here where I live is my country, that also implied a willingness to back that up, to fight for that with the force of arms if necessary. But in addition to that, it was also a commitment to the people around them, a commitment to build, to create institutions of beauty, of solidarity, of care, and a realization that these streets, these blocks, this land, this earth, there is no other, and it is worth fighting for, and we will not be moved from it.
And you touched on this a bit at the beginning in terms of how you came across your great-grandfather's story, or how you came across the Bund through your great-grandfather's story and through his art. But you wrote that the Bund's philosophy spoke to your sense of Jewishness in a way neither the synagogue nor Israel ever had. And, I imagine this is true for a lot of people, like you said, that were reaching out after the 2018 article was published. But can you maybe talk a bit more about that? And why is this so important now in this moment of the genocide in Gaza?
And one of the many things that Zionists have tried to do, and it's not the worst thing, obviously the worst thing Zionists have done is what they've done to Palestinians, but one of the many things that they've done is they've tried to colonize all of Jewish history, and they've tried to make it seem like their ideas were always inevitable, like they were universally accepted, like there was no alternative. And I think that many people, when they reject Zionism, when they reject this supremacist ideology, they're left with a hole in them because they don't know what their actual history is. They have not been given the opportunity to learn about that. And the truth is that Jewish history is the history of diasporas. It is an incredibly plural history. It is the story of people who lived in Mumbai and Argentina and London and the Pale of Settlement and New York City, people who spoke Ladino and Bukharian and Yiddish, people who were diverse, who had all sorts of ideas, and who overwhelmingly fought to stay in their homes and fought to live their lives where they were. And so one of the things that I'm trying to do is I'm trying to show one specific Jewish history, which is the history of Jewish socialism, history of the Jewish workers' movement in Eastern Europe. And I think that by learning about these people who were so valiant, who were so universalist and whose critiques are so right, we're reclaiming something from the forces of death. I think the only thing in the world that's going to save us is solidarity across difference. I think that's the only hedge that we possibly have against savagery, against what Naomi Klein calls end times fascism. And that was the essence of what the Bund fought for. It was the idea that you could struggle alongside others for what they called the better and more beautiful world, while not giving up who you were, while not dissolving your own difference. And for me, that's the core of what we can learn from them, both in the tactics of how they did that, in the streets and the tenements of their cities, but also in the valiant way that they fought for that faith. Because, as I look around at, the forces of like tech-enabled dystopia, of war and of death, all we really have is each other. And I think we need to look to our rebel forebearers and learn how they did it so we can learn how to do it better ourselves.
In preparing for this interview with Molly, I watched several videos on her Instagram where she described some of the fascinating histories of various Bund leaders and members through pictures in what she calls a yearbook.
So it's called the Bund in Pictures, Der Bund in Bilder in Yiddish, but I call it a yearbook because it looks like a high school yearbook. It's like little pictures of all of these different like Bundist rank and file activists over like a 50-year period. And some of them are like fabulous and the captions are so funny. There's this one guy who has, I forget his name, but he has like this mustache, like he's in the circus. He looks like he's playing an accordion in like a steampunk ukulele band. That's the only way to describe this guy. And the description of him, it said that this gentleman slapped a police chief because the police chief refused to take off his hat for the red flag during a parade in Lomz and was thus sent to Siberia. So it has like these very short captions that are like that are just, they're so intriguing. And so I've been obsessed with this book, and it just has the best pictures. It has this one of all of these girls on this Bundist sports team in interwar Poland, and they're all like literally wearing booty shorts and like little tank top blouses with like black hearts in the center. And I'm like, damn girls, you look hot. What is this? Like, you look cute. It has like this one of like these guys in a Bundist leather workers union where the guys are like jacked. Like these guys look like they've been going to the gym and they have like their sleeves all rolled up to show their biceps. And like, they look so alive. One of the many things that's really messed up about how a lot of Jewish people from Europe learn their history is they learn about Jewish European history as if everything is just the prelude to the gas chamber. They don't learn about it as something where these are people who lived and had love affairs and, got into beefs with each other and had like theater and art and also ridiculousness and disputation and all of that. They don't view it as something alive. And one of the many reasons that I really, really love this book, Der Bund in Bilder, is these people are so alive in all of like the silliness that implies, in all of the poor fashion choices that implies, many. And
the great ones too, though.
Yeah, and the great ones. There's this one girl, Nadezhda Grinfeld, coolest hat ever. She was like a barricade fighter in Odessa during the revolution of 1905. She led, in 1905, right? This woman led a unit of fighters, to defend a Jewish neighborhood and also looked fucking fabulous.
There must have been so many kind of amazing nuggets of things like that you found doing the research, but how much of that sort of informed the illustrations?
The illustrations are a little bit simpler than I've done before. My last book, I worked with a really amazing Syrian journalist named Marwan Hisham, and I ended up doing like 82 illustrations from his memories. This one, because I wrote so many words, my publisher was like, you're not allowed to do that. No one will buy your book if it's like 500 pages. So they're mostly just portraits of Bundist leaders. And I'm just going to tell you about like my favorite one. So my friend Irena, the amazing poet, she had an aunt who took care of her in the first months of her life because her mom was sick after childbirth. And again, this is in the Warsaw Ghetto. And this aunt, Gina, Irina always told me was lesbian. And I was like, oh, wow, like, how do you know? And she showed me a picture of her. And she is like the hottest butch you have ever seen in your life. Like, you know, when you have like the side of the head shaved and then like the swoof of hair in the front, and then she's like wearing like a tailored shirt and like a tie and just like hot, you know, like so hot. And her aunt Gina, she rescued people from the boxcars. Like she literally pulled people out of boxcars. And you know, she had a girlfriend who was a Polish socialist. They knew each other from like the socialist athletic clubs that they were part of, you know, in their youth. And she was a member of the resistance. And for me, like getting to draw that photo of her that Irena told me like wasn't really published. It was just like a family photo Irena had. It was so cool. It was like resurrecting a part of history. Cause you know, like usually lesbians, they're not really, they don't really feature in a lot of dominant historical narratives. And it was so cool to be able to show this story of this like heroic and also extremely sexy woman.
I'm wondering what role you see for Jewish creatives, both past, like your great-grandfather, and present, like yourself and many others, in documenting the anti-Zionist struggle.
I mean, we're artists, right? That's what we do. Artists can do nothing else but that. And it's funny, I used to be a little bit more skeptical about the utility of art when I was younger. Maybe I was a little more cynical. But seeing the concentrated attack on human creativity, on artists, on writers, on musicians, on actors, that is being waged by the forces of, what would I even call it? By the tech lords, by Silicon Valley right now, by the generative AI companies, by like the Sam Altmans of the world. What better validation is it about how powerful art is and how absolutely essential it is to being human, and about how absolutely essential it is not just to documenting a struggle, but to getting to survive long enough to do it. Nothing has validated my faith in art more than the attacks of our enemies against it.
Well, thank you so much, Molly. It's been amazing to speak to you.
Thank you so much, Maxine. This is a real pleasure.
That was Molly Crabapple. Her latest book, Here Where We Live Is Our Country, will be out in April, and pre-orders are available now. You can read more on everything you heard in today's episode via the link in our show notes. And while you're there, please be sure to subscribe to New Internationalist magazine. It's the best way to support our journalism. You can use the discount code TheWorldUnspun for 20% off your first year of a print and or digital subscription. This episode was hosted and produced by me, Maxine Betteridge-Mose. I'm the digital editor at New Internationalist. My co-editors are Amy Hall, Conrad Landon, Decca Muldowney, Nick Dowson, and Bethany Riley. Our theme music has been produced by Samuel Raphael Williams, and our logo design is by Mari Foos. Audio editing is by Nasik Hamza. Thanks, and we'll be back soon.